Many people say, I don't believe in God.
I don't believe in God. I don't believe in.
But that is not because they went to a certain university and gathered a sufficient amount of empirical evidence to draw the conclusion. Rather, we as human beings, we claim that there is no God because we love our sin. In fact, that is the reason why there's so many different religions in the world, because we don't like to accept the truth that the one true God will lead us to take responsibility and be accountable for the choices we make. So instead, we just concoct up a new creator, we slap upon it another label, and we call it a new religion. We have made a God out in our own image, instead of understanding that we have been made in His. In this video, we will dive into a deeper look, scratching a bit beneath the surface, examining God's Word, its construct and its framework, through the lens and perspective of science, to give us a better understanding of the nature of our Creator. Many people say, I don't believe in God. I believe in science.
I believe in science. I believe in science.
But that is a very uneducated conclusion to come to, as science and the Bible, they don't contradict one another. They simply seek to answer two separate sets of questions. Science, it seeks to answer the how and the when, while the Bible describes the why. Science, rather than being responsible for explanation, is observation. Observation of the natural world, not the supernatural. And maybe one day science could give you not the exact answer for how and when this earth was formed, but it will never be able to describe why. The Bible does. It says the God of all creation has appointed our dates, our times, and our boundaries, so that we would perhaps seek Him, reach out for Him, and find Him. Though God, He is not far from any one of us. The whole reason for our being, every fiber of who we are, it longs to know the why. And the why, for you and I, is to know God, to be known by God, and to make Him known. Our purpose on this earth is to live in a relationship with our Creator. And in the years that I've chosen to follow Jesus Christ, I am yet to hear anyone that is able to stand with a convincing enough argument to oppose the truth that we have a Creator. Each subject, the beginning of the universe, the design of the universe, life, intelligence and reason, consciousness and free will, objective morality and the laws of nature, all of these things, they bear witness and they testify to the truth that we have a God. But we will never acknowledge what we do not want to address. That is like slapping a band-aid over a gunshot wound and expecting it not to fester with infection underneath. You take something as simple as the design of the universe, and you see that it's fine-tuned for life. That we are on a molten hot rock at its core that is somehow comprised of 70% water, soaring through space at 67,000 miles an hour, rotating and revolving on an orbit 94 million miles away from this giant flaming ball that is 109 times the size of our Earth. We're on a perfect axis that 1 degree forward or 1 degree back, we will either freeze to death or scorch up in flames. But yet each single cell of our bodies is kept at homeostasis of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. You are not a coincidence. It is not an accident. To be here is not any happenstance. If there are any natural laws like gravity, these natural laws must have a natural lawgiver, or perhaps a supernatural lawgiver. Before my mom passed away, she was teaching my brother about quantum physics. Beginning to understand this, even at a surface level, has completely conquered my faith. Now I am not a physicist, an astronomer, a logician, philosopher, or a theologian. I am just a beggar that is pointing fellow beggars to the bread. But I began to examine and found that people often claim science has two attempts at explanations for the beginning: the Big Bang Theory and the theory of evolution. Now they are both theories, which is an idea or set of ideas that is intended to explain a fact or an event. Bear with me here, or join along, as I take some time to use the God-given innate understanding, reasoning, and logic that we have all been blessed with since birth. As we look at the Big Bang Theory, it is supposedly a positive and a negative energy force that somehow came together, combusted, and matter was born. But we look at Newton's third law that says every action has an equal and opposite reaction. What initial action caused the reaction? Maybe you look at the theory of evolution. Yes, I know there's microevolution and macroevolution. Sure, a bird's beak will change over the course of 100 years to fit in a flower to get some nectar in the Galapagos Islands. But the idea that it all began with a cell that evolved into an organism, into an ape, and a Homo sapien. Yet we look at the law of conservation of mass that says no matter can be created nor destroyed. Where did that cell come from? Two of the greatest minds of physics are Albert Einstein and Isaac Newton. All of their research pointed towards there being a beginning of space, matter, and time. And they themselves concluded that there's a beginning of space, matter, and time. There must be a spaceless, timeless, immaterial being that brought it all about. That spaceless, timeless, immaterial being is the God of the Bible. Yahweh, Elohim, Jehovah, Adonai, the great I am, who personally stepped into time, space, and matter, Jesus Christ. And 2,024 years ago, lived a perfect life and laid it down on the cross for the sins of humanity. Now, I'll stop preaching about what's important and get back to analyzing the things that have no determination over the eternal destination of our soul. Getting back to space, matter, and time. That is something that science calls a continuum, which means it is impossible for any one of these to exist apart from one another. They must have come into existence simultaneously and spontaneously. If you have matter but no space, where do you put it? If you have matter and space but no time, when do you put it? And while science does not have an answer for the beginning of space, time, and matter, the Bible does. The very first verse, Genesis 1:1, it states, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Or more accurately translated, in the beginning, God created the skies and the land. And there we have it, the very first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, that's time. God created the skies, that's space, and the land, that's matter. The very first verse of the Bible completely aligns with what hundreds of years and thousands of dollars of scientific research has now come to conclude. If we were not so stubborn, we could have saved ourselves a lot of time and a lot of money. But it's in the midst of our stubbornness exactly where God meets us. Now we know that if anything exists, something must be eternal. Our very existence is evidence that there is a creator. Because it's either that God created everything or that everything came here from nothing. And for those that claim to believe it all came here from nothing must go to very strange extents in an attempt to support their claim, even to the point of redefining nothing. Lawrence Krauss, in his book, The Universe from Nothing, goes on to say that because something is physical, nothing must be physical, especially if we define nothing as the absence of something. Nothing must be physical? That is foolish absurdity. If we need to go to that extreme to get rid of God, we are not getting rid of God at all. We are not solving the problem or answering the question that both Lawrence Krauss and Stephen Hawking set up for themselves. That if it all came here from nothing, why does anything exist and not just nothing? Again, a very highly renowned logician, Bertrand Russell, makes a statement supporting that scientism has the reigning view. He says, "What science cannot prove, man cannot know." That in and of itself is a logically incoherent statement. Because if we think about it, what science cannot prove, man cannot know. That statement is something science cannot prove. This message is simply an invitation for you and I to stop and to reevaluate, to ask ourselves a very honest and vulnerable question. Do I really believe what I say I believe? And the more that I learn, the greater my appreciation grows for God. In 2012, a group of scientists was doing research at CERN in Switzerland, desiring to know more about the cell, which we know is comprised of a nucleus surrounded by protons and electrons and neutrons that orbit, rotate, and revolve around it. They found that both protons and neutrons are made up of something called quarks. So in a desire to know more, they took two protons, they fired them at one another. When they collided, they responded just like sound waves. And it's there and then that those scientists labeled it the God particle. That sounds to me exactly how the Bible describes God brought forth creation. When God spoke, let there be light. It was the sound of God's voice that space, time, and matter had their beginning. And it's neat how the micro-universe reflects the macro-universe. That under a microscope, you look in that Petri dish and you see that cell, which again, at the center is a nucleus surrounded by protons and electrons and neutrons that orbit, rotate, and revolve around it. But swap out the microscope and pick up a telescope, and you see the same thing. That in our solar system, the nucleus, our sun, surrounded by protons and electrons and neutrons that orbit, rotate, and revolve around it. Those are the planets. The micro-universe that we see with a microscope, it reflects the macro-universe that we see with a telescope. The cell structure, it's the same as the solar system, because the same God, the God of the universe, He created them both. And as we look into some of those subjects, the beginning of the universe, the deeper we dig, the more evidence we find, and the greater glory is brought to God. For something as simple as the second law of thermodynamics, that states energy in this universe is constantly dissipating. From that, we can draw the conclusion that the universe had a beginning, because if it has always existed, we would have run out of usable energy by now. You leave a hot cup of coffee on the kitchen table in the morning, and by noontime, it's lukewarm. Or objective morality. If there is an objective law, there must be an objective lawgiver. But if there is no God, there is no objective morality. You're not able to blame someone that would look at what the Nazi Germans did to the Jewish people in World War II and just write it off as some sort of survival of the fittest, or only the strong survive. But that would be absurdity. My friends, we did not just evolve from an ape. We didn't come from an orangutan. We're not a meat robot or a wet machine. You and I have been created in the image of God. We're the only creatures with a soul. Yes, animals, they have spirits, but they do not have a soul. A dog will whimper and wail while you're away at the amusement park because it misses you. But animals, they only act on their instinct. What they are cognitively aware of is best for their survival. But we as human beings, we often act out of our emotions, out of our free will. We don't just do what we know is best for our survival, we do what we want. You and I wouldn't look in nature and see a lion ferociously rip a zebra down by its neck and maul it. A lion ferociously rip a zebra down by its neck and maul it.
A lion ferociously rip a zebra down by its neck and maul it.
And say that's murder. That would just simply be the food chain. But if you and I were to go out in public and grab another person by the neck, ferociously maul them and start eating them and say, well, I was hungry, you would be admitted to prison. We don't look at a shark going around during mating season and forcibly copulating with another shark and call it rape. But if another human being were to go around town and sleep with every person of the opposite sex and come back to their husband or wife and say, oh, it was mating season, that marriage would end in divorce very quickly. And the living word speaks. The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of His hands. Every picture-perfect painted sunset that God stretches across the landscape is Him bearing witness and giving testimony to His glory. When we stand before God, no one is going to be with an excuse. Not one person will say, God, I didn't know, or I hadn't heard. For the Bible declares that God has bore witness of His existence on the mind and the heart of every human being. God has bore witness of His existence on the mind of every human being through creation. We look at a building, we know that it had a builder. We look at a painting, we know that it had a painter. And so we look at creation, we know that it had a creator. And God has bore witness of his existence on the heart of every human being through our conscience. We do not need to teach a little child not to steal, cheat, or kill. These things innately, intrinsically, and inherently have been etched and inscribed in every part of who we are since birth. So God, he has bore witness of his existence on the mind and the heart of every human being. It is one thing to believe in God, and it is another thing to believe God. To believe in God is only to acknowledge his existence, but to believe God, that is to trust and depend upon his character, to believe in every part of who he is, and that is of much greater worth. The Bible declares it is impossible to please God without faith. Anyone that comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those that earnestly seek him. Faith, it is the evidence of things that are hoped for and the substance of what is not yet seen. Now, in order for any human being to continue to live, science declares that in order for one Homo sapien to sustain life, we need food, water, air, and light. And in 4 simple statements, the Bible declares that Jesus Christ, he is these 4 things. He speaks, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will no longer walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. I am the living water. Whoever drinks of the water that I give them will have rivers of living water flowing forth within them. That God, he formed man from the dust of the ground, and he breathed the breath of life into his nostrils, and the man became a living being. So in 4 simple statements, Jesus Christ, he is the very 4 things that scientists say we need to survive. He is the bread of life, the living water, the light of the world, and the breath of life. Now it is our calling, our desire, our purpose to get to know this Creator, to have a relationship with God. That same logician, Bertrand Russell, he says, if there is a God, I think it very unlikely that he would be of such uneasy vanity to be offended by those who doubt his existence. So my friends, that insecure Creator doesn't exist. Rather, the true God, who dwells in unapproachable light, has put on the very flesh that he created, stepped into the time that he began, among the people that he formed on the ground that he made. In his Son, Jesus Christ, he fulfilled the promise that he had spoken over all creation in every nation throughout each generation, when he said, I will live in them and walk among them. I will be their God and they will be my people. It's about a relationship with him. He suffered and died on the cross to forgive us of our sin. And Jesus Christ was raised again from the grave. He now stands alive, offering peace, mercy, and joy. Eternal life to those who are willing to come with a humble heart. This Creator, he desires to know your heart, and that you would get to know his.